Welcome to my parlor. Hi, I'm Priscilla Andrews with Prairie Parlor, and today I'm going to show you how to make a Winter Wonderland light switch plate. It is easy and it's quick and only requires a couple of colors of clay. So let's just go get started. Okay, over there. Go. For our light switch plate, we're going to need a new light switch plate and take some rough sandpaper. This is a grade 60, but anything 120 or under, and I'll show you why we have to do that later, but just kind of scratch that surface up with that. Gonna need your cutters, your blade. You're going to need some sort of pointed tool. If you don't have an awl or something like this, then a toothpick should work fine. I'm going to be using white liquid polymer clay. I happen to be using Sculpey, but I'm sure any brand will work. For our clay, we are going to be using some scrap clay, and then you will need white, about the equivalent of 2 bars from a 4-ounce package. And then we need a olive green. And then you're going to need a darker green. Just make sure that it's darker than the olive green or the fir tree green that we're used to seeing. Next, we need to have, in my case, I'm going to use a pan pastel. And you could use mica powder, or you could use acrylic paint, whatever you'd like to use or feel comfortable using, but I'm going to show you how I did it using pan. Okay, here we have our scrap polymer clay or mud, whichever it is, and I want it rolled out on a setting 3 or maybe even 4, but you do not want this to be very thick. And to tell you the truth, with the shortage of the white clay that we have now in January of 2021, I am glad to do anything to be able to not use more of my white clay. You want to make sure that this is just a little bit bigger all the way around from the light switch. And the reason for that is this has a curve in it. So you're going to need more material than you see here. And so that's good. Rolled out on a setting number 3. Also rolled out on a setting number 3 is our white. So what we're going to do is take this white and put it on top of our scrap clay. First, I want to show you something because I didn't nuclear clean my room. My white has some spots on it, and that is okay because we are going to be covering most of this white up anyway with Christmas trees or liquid clay or pastel. So if you don't have that white perfect, that's just fine. Now what I like to do, instead of putting the top on the bottom, this is just my preference, especially when the top is bigger than the bottom, is I like to put the bottom on the top instead of the other way around. And I'm sure you don't need to spend your good time watching me put this on. Shucky darn. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the edges away so that I know exactly what I'm dealing with as I look at the clay, how much clay I have, and the amount that I need over the edges. Now, the next step is to add those trees. What we do want to do with this white before we put the trees on is take your light switch plate and we're going to lightly press it in. We would like a guide to kind of show us where the edges of our design are going to be. And we know that we're going to have to go a little bit over this edge. That was fun. We know we're going to have to go a little bit over that edge. I think you can see that there because we have to account for the extra distance on that slope of that light switch plate. I forgot to mention that if you have any white left over from the white that you had cut to put on top of your scrap clay here, keep that on hand because you might want to use that in your design with your trees. So just keep that in hand. So here are my two trees colors. This is an olive green, and this is a little bit darker forest green or something. What we're going to do now is we're going to cut the Christmas trees out of the green and dark green. I just freehand drew a quick and easy little tree. You don't have to be too worried about what it's going to look like because we're going to be doing things to it that are going to be changing the look and the shape. So I made of the light green, I'm making two, and I'm making one the full size of this tree that I cut out. And before I drew or cut out my tree, I referenced the size of the tree on my light switch plate. How big are they going to be and kind of where they're going to go. So that's how I figured out what size I wanted here. Now to make a smaller tree, you don't need another Christmas tree form. All you need to do is put it down a little bit farther like this on to the color. And the same goes for the darker color. Only I'm going to put the tree down even farther, if I can get the dang thing picked up. Because the dark trees are going to be in the background, so they're going to be smaller. So I'm going to put them down even farther here like this, so I have smaller trees. So I'm going to go ahead and use my X-Acto knife and cut two trees out of the green, the light green, and two trees out of the dark green by just going around and cutting around my tree. Go. I have my trees cut out, and as you can see, I didn't get everything cut out perfectly, and I'm not going to worry about that. And as we go to the next step, you're going to see why I'm not worried about that. Before we do anything else with these trees, we're going to set them aside for now. And I'm going to take out the white that we had taken out for the background on the switch plate. So here's our form. The first thing I need to do before I put any trees on here, because it's going to influence where I put the trees, is I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to mark by going all the way through the clay and making a little hole here where we're going to be having our openings, because that's going to influence our design. And so that's going to give me some guide that I need in placing my trees. Now I'm going to take the background trees first, and I'm going to kind of lay them out on how I think I want them to be. Kind of in the background. I'm not going to press them down until I decide what I want to do. Somewhere in here. Looks like I might add one more tree to this. I have more space than I thought, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go. Now for the next part, we're going to take the white that you have and have your areas marked out. What we're going to do is add the oil pastel, in this case light blue, to the outline that we have for the light switch. I'm applying this about halfway through the marker here, and I like to apply it unevenly so that I get a little bit different effect in different areas. And by that I mean that it looks like a snowy, a foggy evening. I couldn't spit that out there. So now I'm just taking my finger and I'm just going to rub it around here until I get it to where and how I like it. Okay, now we have our blue background all set out. Got a dark spot there, not gonna worry about it. And the next thing we're going to do is put our trees on. And I'm kind of looking here at the line that I have for the background, and I can imagine hills of snow. So I'm going to set this is not permanent. I'm just trying to see how it's going to look. I think that looks pretty good. Now we're going to undo what we just did. And I'm kind of laying them out on the piece of paper where they're going to go on the final layout. And I can leave the last two on because what we're going to do now is texture them. And this is where we take our tool or our owl, and we're just going to start at the bottom of these branches and make a whole bunch of lines. And that's going to be our fir tree. And that is going to be where we're going to be putting snow on top of those branches. So just do some scratching here like this all over the tree. So go ahead and do the next tree, and then I'll be right back. I now have both of these trees scratched in. I don't know if you can see that there. There we go. The scratches and that I've made. And now we're going to go with the next tree, and we're going to do the very same thing. I'm almost done with putting all of my Christmas trees on. I'm going to be putting two more up in the front here, but I want to stop at this point and mention a couple of things. The first is that as you go along, while you're dragging all of these lines that you've drawn into your Christmas tree, you've got lots of little pieces of that green that has balled up. So try and get them off as gently as you can with this, and if that doesn't work, your finger, come back in with a toothbrush and just try and brush as much of those little balls that have balled up when you drew your lines as possible. If you do it gently, you don't mar the lines you've made, but I don't know if you can see all the little green things that are coming off. And again, I'm not real worried right now about that white staying perfectly white on the bottom, because before we put our next two trees on, I'm going to show you why we kept back some white. This has been rolled out to, I believe it's the thickness of number 4, and I am just going to put a snowdrift in here. So I'll show you how that's done. So to make that snowdrift, I am just going to cut some of this off, and I'm going to just, I should have put it in earlier. I wanted it to go behind that tree, but I guess it's just going to have to go behind that tree a little bit. So I'm going to cut this even shallower, and I'm going to place the snowdrift like right there. And I'm not worried about that part, as you'll see as we do it. And I'm smushing the line down in a little bit so that that snowdrift doesn't show up as a bump as much behind the next tree that I'm going to put with it, which is this one. It's going to go kind of right here. I want its top to be spaced there. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I want a little snowdrift. coming out from that tree, kind of going off here. And again, I'm going to blend that in. And then this bigger tree is going over there. Now that I lay that down, I don't like that as much. So, you want a design lesson today too? I'm sure you're all already able to figure that out. And know what's good design and bad design, and that's when you see it, you know. So I'm gonna put this, I want that kind of over the edge, but not completely. Yeah, I'm gonna like that a lot better. So I'm gonna have a snowdrift. I think I'll put a little bit of a snowdrift in here. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do this one first next, and then I'll be back with another snowdrift. Okay, I have my last tree all scratched up, I guess is what I call it. Before I go and add that last little bit of a snowdrift here, I'm going to go back and I'm going to check and see this snowdrift here needs to be blended in to the white underneath of it on the bottom part so that it stands out on the top as a snowdrift, but the bottom just blends with the rest of the snow. So I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. And snow is bumpy. You may have to make it perfectly smooth. Just do the best you can. And I'm also going to blend that in here on the bottom. So we're going to be stretching that bottom out to fit around the light switch. And then finally, I'm going to look up here and see if there's any places that need a little bit more of my oil pastel added to it from marks that I've made. You can see around the tree where I pushed on it, and a little bit more around that tree. So I'm going to go in and just fill in some of those spaces. Take it a little farther out to the edge because I know we're going to be stretching that out, and I think I got a little tight in places. And now I'm going to take a very small, teeny tiny paintbrush, and I am just going to brush that in along the tree in those places where I gouged the blue with some implement. So we're just gonna rub the rest of that in. And don't worry about it being perfect because we're actually going to be sanding that later. Okay, so I have my last tree in. I wanted to put just a little bit of a snowdrift over the front of that tree that's going to come in kind of like this. And again, we're just adding visual dimension because we're actually going to be putting liquid polymer clay and glitter on that snow on top of the snowdrifts. And this snowdrift, if you want to, or blend it in, you can. It's not blended in on that area, of course, but I'm just going to kind of blend it into this snowdrift down here with my favorite sculpting tool. There. Oh, I forgot. One more thing. Got that little hole up there. We still have a hole down here, and we have to have that hole. So I'm just going to push it through enough to mark it because you don't want that sticking out. As a matter of fact, the edge has to be kind of beveled when you do that. So I make it a little bigger, and then I go around in a circle like that because that will enable the screw to screw in more efficiently because it has to be a little beveled for the wider part of that screw. And this seems to, at least has always served me well in terms of working to get that stuff in there. And then I get impatient pulling it out and crack it. I love polymer clay. It's so forgiving. So we're just going to leave that there. The other thing is I'm going to go ahead and cut the center out here. And I can still see that center. And that's going to help guide us as far as where we can put the liquid polymer clay, snow, and glitter and stuff. So I want to get this lined up as well as I can, so I know better where to cut. And there will be enough clay left to roll it down over the edges of that middle part there. So let's just cut that out. There, now we know what we have, don't have, and what we need and don't need. How's that sound? Now I'm going to take this flat end again, and I'm just going to kind of roll that down so that the design continues on into the light switch rather than just have an abrupt stop at an edge. Of course, you could use your fingers too. Especially the top and the bottom, you need space because that's where your fingers are going to go to find the light switch. So it's best to just keep that nice and beveled so your fingers can figure out where they need to be when you turn a light switch on in the dark. Okay, there. I think we're good. Of course, we're going to be sanding that, making the edges a little nicer with sandpaper. So now we're ready to put this on top of my light switch plate. I fold the edges over, and folding them, don't worry about this again, we can always fix that later. I fold the edges over, and then I start cutting them off as gently as I can. And what I do is I kind of roll this with each time that I press it down, because if you just cut, just going like this, it's going to move, it's going to tear in places. So just rolling this one blade at a time seems to work the best as far as not marring up your junk. So now we have that clay showing, the mud, our scrap clay, showing under the white where we cut it. So just take your thumb and smush that white down. Now if you want to, you could always just take a strip of white and put it around the edge. I'm just going to smush it down. So I'm going to finish trimming this up and closing my seams, and then I'm going to bake it. Okay, my friends, I have a confession. I've made like 4 of these things, and this time when I baked this one, I covered it with, or tinted it with, my aluminum foil, and sometime during the baking, the foil actually fell onto this light switch plate. And I've never had that happen before, and I thought, well, I just got to start all over again, but I'm too lazy. So just ignore the burn marks up here. And I've already painted this part white again, and I waited for this part because normally, skipping that part, what I would do is I would go to the white up here where we had some blue showing through. If you want to make it, if you have that happen, just go in and touch that up. We're going to touch that up even more in a little bit. I'm not even worrying about getting white on the trees, because that's what we're going to be doing next, is putting white on the trees. So just ignore my distorted and burnt light switch plate, please. And see, number 1, how human I am, and number 2, how lazy I am, I guess. So there we go with that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my liquid Sculpey and I am going to put that in these handy dandy little stainless steel cups that are actually condiment cups for the restaurant industry, but I am going to put some of the white in here, and then we're going to do the next step, which is putting the snow on the trees. For this step, I'm going to use a toothpick as soon as I can get it here. So I've just got a toothpick, and now we have all of these ridges sticking up from texturing our trees. And stop, I just forgot because I was trying to overlook the burn. The next thing I do is I sand the sky. I am using 320 grit wet dry sandpaper, and skies are never consistently one color, and so it also kind of adds to the country look or the country appeal to just kind of roughen that up a little bit if you want. Now this has got bubbles and stuff in it from the burning, and if you have any really bad rough spots up there, we're going to be covering them with clay and glitter anyway. So I just wanted you to see how I do just a little bit of texturing of the sky. It could be a coming night sky and stars are showing, whatever you want it to be, or skip that step if you fall in love with the sky that you make. So next I'm going to take some white polymer clay and just kind of cover the end of my stick like this. I don't want a giant bulb on the end like I have, so I'm going to let it run down just a little bit. And then what I do is I just kind of paint the tops of the trees with this, wherever you would like your snow to fall, which is usually on the tops of branches. And I just kind of scrape the toothpick over the tree because we want the texture to show through with the scratches being down deep and not turning white. And so I am just going to keep going through and adding white polymer clay in this way until my trees are all done. Welcome back. Here we are, and I have that white polymer clay all over the trees. It is not uniform, it is not even, because snow doesn't usually work that way. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put just a few dots in the sky and around so that they look like snowflakes falling. And so I'm just going to take this, and this time you want the paint to form a little bulb at the end of it, because you're just going to dab and pull away, depending on what size you want your snowflakes to be. I don't want mine real big. But you want to apply enough paint so that when we put the glitter on, which is we're going to do next, it has to have something to stick to. There now is some snowdrops or snowflakes. And now I'm going to take this white and I'm going to just go along like the ridge of those snowbanks that we made. And then I'm going to just slowly bring a little bit of it down. And again, we want the glitter to stick to some of this, and that's only going to happen if it's wet. So just kind of pull it down however you want the glitter to lie. Here's that other snowdrift that we put cattywampus in here, and I'm just going to pull that down. I'm gonna do up here where that snowdrift was. We're ready to be almost done with this. I'm going to take a sheet of my wax paper and put it under here, because that way I can reuse my glitter. And I'm going to put this right here. And I am using micro glitter. I'm selecting the white that I have that has little flashes of green and blue, because I thought that would look more like snow. And so now I'm just going to apply the glitter to the whole thing. I just like the 3D effect I get from using just another layer of the polymer clay and then baking it again. So look how pretty that looks. And see how this snowdrift just stands out a little bit better when you make it more three-dimensional and then line it with the glitter. So I'm going to bake this and then we're done. Let me show you one that didn't get burned. Here's another light switch plate that I did, that I sanded the top off, most of the blue off, and then made just the same way I made this one, except for the burning part. So go give it a try. Let me know how yours worked out or how you finished yours so I could see it. But thanks for joining me.